Get it like a Ethel Merman song or something. Just kidding. What am I doing here? All right.
You gonna put numbers on your tapes?
Yeah.
You know which one's second and first?
I already did. Are you impressed with my directing?
Yeah,
I'm incredible in it.
yeah.
Would you compare me to Steven Spielberg?
I don't know Steven Spielberg.
You know, E.T. All those cool movies.
He hasn't seen a movie in 40 years.
What was the last movie you've seen?
Godfather.
What year?
60s.
Long time ago. And the second one, the last one was, what's the one that John Wayne playing?
Unforgiven. All right, is that
There's been a lot of them.
Oh, a long time ago. I can't think.
She wore a yellow ribbon?
No. But I was on vacation, and Claire was about 4 years old, and we went down to the Sangers and saw it. And on that show, he said, "Son of a bitch," and it shocked the shit out of me. With Claire sitting right behind me. And after that, maybe a year later, is when I saw Godfather. So it's probably 40 years.
Matt? Do you want to see so you don't have to get up, or you want to get up?
Nah, just
And if it gets to where you can't see, don't worry about time code. Just ballpark it. At least as long as we get this stuff, we'll be good. All right. So far we've talked about ancestry stuff. We've talked about you as a young man. We talked about war, and we talked about William, you, your grandparents. Let's move on to can we talk about when you met Momo and some of that time? What was that like? And maybe start with the year, maybe, or can you just kind of tell us about how y'all met and the process of when you got married. That's a good story about how quick it was and the pictures and all that stuff. Anything you want.
All right. Let me see what we're going to talk about. Grandma. We met on a blind date. The year must have been probably 1941, maybe late 40, but no, right about in that area. Then when I went to LSU, we kind of communicated back and forth. And when I came home on the weekend, we'd have dates. And one night I came there to pick off for a date. And her mom had heard stories about another boy in St. Rose. So when I come to the door, the mama says, "Claire can't go out tonight. She's sick." And I said, "That's strange. I just talked to myself. That's strange. I just talked to her about a couple of hours ago." So here it was, either New Year's Eve or something, and I didn't have a date. Anyway, we talked later on, and I guess our mama decided to accept me. And all the while I was at LSU, we'd date now and then when I come home on the weekend. When I went in the Army, we were pretty tight. And when I came home after I got my wings, that's when we decided to get married. I only had a 10-day leave. So we were going to get married, and this was Lent time. In Lent, you're not supposed to get married. So we had to get a dispensation from the Pope, not the Pope, from the bishop, to get married during Lent. Then you also had to announce it in church for so many weeks ahead of time that you were getting married. We didn't have the time. We were going to get married in 2 days. So we had to get another dispensation from the bishop to get married without the announcements. Well, I didn't have to worry about clothes. I had a uniform. She had to go out and get a dress. She had to get a best bridesmaid, and I had to get a best man. We didn't have time to shop around anything, so we just got a sister and my brother-in-law to be the best mate. Afterwards, we had a little breakfast at, I don't know the name of the restaurant. It used to be on Airline Highway. Then we went home, packed, and a few hours later we took a train and went back to Mission, Texas, where I was going to be stationed for the next 30 days. So she followed me around from Mission, Texas until I got to South Carolina. And when we got to South Carolina, there was about 2 days left before I left. She was going to come home. So I put on a train. I think it was in Richmond, Virginia. And when I put on the train started with me on it. And I couldn't get off. The train was moving too fast. So the conductor told me, well, you just have to wait till the next stop to get off. That's all there is to it, which is probably about 60 miles. I don't remember what it was. But I got off on the train, and in those old country towns, they didn't have no Greyhound buses or anything. They had something like a school bus that stopped at every little street. So it took me like the rest of the night. It was almost daybreak when I got back to the base to travel those 60 miles. So that was the excitement we had sending her home.
We'll come back to a little bit in a second. Let's talk about, we just got done talking about the war a few minutes ago and coming home. Bring us back to your getting off the, well, you just got married. Start us off, you get back from the war and you're starting a family and you decide on a house or you decide to do whatever it is you do, and where is that? And tell me about y'all starting a family and how did that happen?
All right, we want to know about when we start the family and when we got back from the Army. Got back from the Army, I think was a few days before Christmas in 1945. Of course, I wasn't discharged then. I had 60 days terminal leave coming, so I didn't get discharged actually until about the 1st of February. She had rented an old apartment in Calton off of Green Street. It was really a shabby place, but it looked good to us at the time. Then right around the corner, a little single house opened up for rent, and we rented that, and that was another mess. It was upright boards is all that made the wall, and they had paper on the wall. When the wind blew, the paper moved in the wintertime. Eventually, though, we moved to another house, which was a little better. Then we bought a house in Jefferson. Turned out to be too close to the railroad tracks going up the bridge. When those trains would hit the engines to go up the bridge, it would shake the whole house. So we ended up selling that one. Then we bought a house in Gentilly. Then another house in Gentilly. And then we moved here on Andrews Avenue, where we've been for 32 years. Of course, the last 10 years, she always had something wrong with her, heart problems, 2 broken hips, a colon resection, and then started having trouble with a heart valve, and then finally end up with heart failure that killed her. And she died in June the 30th, 1903. So she'll be dead 18 months next month, at the end of this month.
What was it like at this house? Is this when you started to have kids?
No. We started having kids in the first house we moved into. I got out in December. We had the first child, Ray, in November, which was, 11 months afterwards there. Then Bobby was born, I guess, in one of the other houses we lived in around Calton Avenue 2 years later. And Claire was born when we went into that new house we bought in New Orleans, which is 7 years after Bobby. Then when we moved here, the only one that was still home was Claire. Bobby and Ray were married. So it wasn't too long after we moved here, really, that about 3 years that Claire got married, and then they all were gone.
Come on, Chester, come on.
Falls down. Couldn't see it.
Be up alive.
Yeah, I know, but I couldn't see it.
What was early life like when the kids came along, and what were you and Mama doing, jobs, and what was it like
Well,
in the house?
What was it like when we first got out the Army and with the jobs? It was bad, because I had no really specialty, and I didn't want to go back and finish in accounting. Accounting was, I was convinced, was not what I wanted. So I took a job in a millwork place, on-the-job training, where the government paid you and they paid you, and you did a little night school to help train you. And actually, the night school was not doing me any good because it was scheduled at a third or fourth grade level. So I just decided I wasn't going to do it. And the company I was working with decided they'd pay me what the government was paying me, so it worked out all right. But it wasn't really high-paying jobs, so things were kind of tight. But we made do with what we had.
What did Mama do when you were at work?
She mainly took care of the house.
What were holidays like, and were there any memories about birthdays or holidays or things like that? How did the family work?
Well, holidays was more or less like it was get-togethers, you know, between the families, sometime here, sometime somewhere else. And, of course, all through the years, most of the time it was almost official that we'd have the Christmas party here at night. And for years, every Christmas we had it where everybody came over. And as they went their ways, they kind of broke up a little bit. So now it's whatever happens on a holiday is usually different from what it was last year, but it's always just mainly family getting together.
Describe each one of your kids. Give their full name and tell a little bit about them when they were little and just who they are.
What were the kids like? Well, Ray was hell. He always wanted to do something he wasn't supposed to do. He had a mind of his own, just like he's got today. He always thought he was right and he wasn't wrong. And when Bobby came along, after Bobby got a little bigger, I thought Bobby was going to be an idiot because Ray wouldn't let him do anything he wanted to do. He always figured he could do it better than Bobby, so he wanted to do it. He didn't want to give Bobby a chance to do anything. Of course, I guess Bobby was strong enough that he worked his way out of that. Then about 7 years after that, Claire came along, and she was a normal child, no problem with her. She went to high school, finished high school. In high school, she took typing and shorthand, and she got a pretty good job when she got out of high school until she started having problems with MS, and then that knocked her out of the box for the rest of her life.
Is there a family history of, on the left side or the right side of medical things like diseases or anything like that?
Well, on the Laiche side, I don't know of any. Mom and Daddy didn't have heart problems. On the Bryan side, they all had little problems with the heart. The daddy died very young, about 60-something, with heart problems. The mother, which is their grandma, the children's grandma, she had angina for years and years and years, taking nitroglycerin pills by the dozens. But that's about the only thing that was wrong, mainly heart problems on that side.
When did all your kids move out, and what was it like when they moved out, and what was that process like for you and Mama?
Well, I guess the first one to move out was right when he got married. And then Bobby was gone for about 4 years when he was in the National Guards. And I don't think it was too long after he got out the National Guard, he got married, a couple of years. Well, not the National Guard, the Coast Guard he was in, not the National Guard. But a couple of years, I think, after he got out the Coast Guard, he got married. And then they just left us with Claire for about 10 years, I guess, when she got married. And then, well, we were just free and easy. We didn't have no kids to worry about anymore.
What was it like thinking that your boys may get drafted? What was society
Well,
like during that time, and then you thinking your kids may get drafted?
About the getting drafted deal, Ray had joined the National Guard for, I don't remember how many years, it had to be 6 years, where he served, I think, 4 months active duty. Then he served every once a month on Sundays. And I think Bobby went into the Coast Guard because I think the National Guard had cut that out at the time. He couldn't get in the National Guard. They had quit taking people, so I guess he figured the Coast Guard was the easiest way out of this, like I did. So they both weren't drafted. And luckily, neither one of them had to get into any fighting.
Being a World War II vet, what did that war look like on the outside compared to this war, looking at the outside? Because on World War II, before you got in, you were looking kind of from the outside. Looking at these two wars, what did that look like for you? And then thinking that your boys may possibly be going, what was that like?
Well, I was afraid of it, but when they joined the National Guards and the Coast Guard, that kind of eased the situation, figured they were safe from being drafted. And most of the army that was fighting then was draftees. It wasn't National Guards like it is now. So I think they had made a good decision about what they did.
What are your children's full names?
The oldest one is Louis Ray Laiche Jr. The next one is Robert Stephen Laiche. And the third one is Claire Ann Laiche. Grandchild's last name, she's married.
How did those names come about?
Well, I guess it was just kind of the first one ought to be named after me, I imagine. And the other one is probably we just went back and forth what we're going to call Bobby. So, and actually, Claire was mainly named because her mama's name was Claire, but instead of saying Meg Claire, we call her Claire Ann. And that's probably about how it came about.
Tell me about the weddings. What was it like being a parent, seeing your children get married? And who
Well-
did the kids marry?
Well, the oldest kid married Mona barefoot. And I guess it was nice to see one of them finally leaving and getting out of the way. He's going to have to take on his real responsibilities. Unfortunately, they end up having a divorce after a number of years. I don't remember how many years it was, quite a few. And Bobby, let's see, I kind of lost my train of thought of what I'm talking about. Bobby was married to Debbie, your mother, and that was a nice wedding. And that was good, too, to see him get off and have to struggle for himself. Then Claire somehow met Frank, which we weren't happy at the time. We didn't think he was right for her. But they ended up, after going out about a year together, got married. And I guess it works out okay because he's been having a hard time taking care of her with the MS. But I guess all in all, they all did pretty well.
What's it like being a grandparent and seeing your kids have kids? Tell me about that.
Well, it's nice to see that the family's going on. Of course, we're getting low on the family now. We got to get something going on here. Because I only got one boy that can carry on the Laiche family. But it was good to see all the kids come along. It would be nice to get a great-grandchild before I kick the bucket.
Tell me your kids, tell me your kid and the name of their kid. Tell me the grandkids' names and who they come from.
Well, let's see what we're going to do with the grandkids. The grandkids, the oldest one is Tammy Rose Laiche, which is Ray and Mona's child. And she's, I think, around 32. And she's still single, so I don't know if she's ever going to get married. And the next one is Jason Laiche, and that's the one we're counting on to carry the name on. But it looks like he's not giving us any hope right now. So maybe he'll succeed pretty soon and find the right person. Then the next one is Kelly Laiche, and Jason is Bobby and Debbie's son. Then we come to Kelly, who is Bobby and Debbie's daughter. And I think she's around 23 or 24. Oh, Jason was about 27, I think. 28, 29. Kelly was married, I think, about a year ago. And she married Scott Dolberson. I can't remember the exact name. Broderson. And so far, no great-grandchildren yet. So we'll just keep waiting.
Let's talk about, how you doing, all right? Okay. Let's talk about let's go back to family life and look at more specifically Mama, and if you could tell me her full name, and we'll talk about anything you want or don't want. If we don't want, you talk about as much as you want. Tell me her full name, and maybe tell me about you and her relationship up until a couple years ago, starting maybe around right after you got married.
Relationship with my wife, her full name was Mary Claire Brian Laiche. We were married in 1944 on the 21st of March, which I used to think was the first day of spring, but I understand that's the 20th is the first day of spring, so I was wrong for a number of years. And we had a normal life, ups and downs, tough times and good times. But not too long ago, well, a while ago, almost 10 years, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And I got some pictures here from the 50th wedding anniversary. We just had a small get-together with our kids and our brothers and sisters and relatives. And this is a picture of us, and we had it at Copeland. I think we had a nice time. We had it on the 21st of March in 1994. And these are basically just pictures taken at Copeland that day. And some of the people showing, this is her sister Ruby that's still living. This is Bobby over here. And I think this is Ray with half of him cut off. And there's Jason right here. And this is the same group of people just showing from a different angle. But this is me and Mary Claire. And that's her sister Amy that died about 6 or 7 months ago. And this is a picture of all the brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws. The only one living is Ed, Ruby, and Janet. This is Ray standing up. And this must be when I got the bill to pay for it. But I think everybody had a good time.
What were your...
And in fact, there's another picture around here somewhere. That's a 50th anniversary picture that we took later on. And then, from then on, she was basically something wrong with her almost all the time, between the broken hips, colon, heart surgery. And the last 14 months she lived, she was in a nursing home. It just got to the point where I couldn't take care of her no more because she couldn't walk. And it was pretty hard, but the doctor told me for months to better put her in a nursing home or she would kill me. And 18 months ago, at the end of this month, she passed away. But we did have a party about 4 months before she passed away, for less than 4 months, about 2 months, for our 59th anniversary, because I figured one of us wouldn't make the 60th anniversary, so we better have the party on the 50th anniversary. Had a nice little party here, and I'm sure she enjoyed it. I think we got some pictures scattered around in there of that. So then she died a few months later, on June the 30th, and it's been 18 months, 30th of this month. That about ends 59 years.
What makes a marriage go 59 years?
Putting up with a lot of crap. Listening to a lot of crap. One thing I got to say to her that you didn't ask about is the kids have really been good to me since their mama passed away. Without that help, it would have been real hard. So that was a big help.
How would they help?
Well, just calling, seeing if I'm okay, seeing if I need something done, bringing me to their parties.
What's present day like for you? Tell me about some of the things you do, or
Well, the bad part about me is I don't have any hobbies, and I can't seem to get interested in any hobbies. I went down to the senior citizens home and tried to get involved there, but I ain't nothing but a bunch of old ladies. And nothing there really appealed to me. I felt like it was worse being there than being on my own. So I just tried every day to go to the mall, take a walk, sit around a while and watch the people move. And between the other stuff having I got to do, it kind of keeps me busy. Of course, I watch more TV than I want to. But I manage with it. Got to do it.
what is present day, the way that you live now, compared to when you were little back in the St. Rose. Tell me about some of the differences on how you look at things, and also some of the differences practically how you go about your day.
When I lived in St. Rose, when I was small, I never had any worries. I thought everything was great. I guess Mom and Daddy had the worries, but as far as we were concerned, they never told us of any problems and never told us how hard things was or whether it was hard or not. So it was always good as far as I was concerned. Of course, now it's a different story. You got to worry about all the problems. You got to handle the problems. So that's about the main difference, really.
The way houses are now, and I know what most of the changes are, but I wanna hear it from you. You know, like this morning, you got up, you shaved, the heat was on, but specifically back then, when you were a kid, how did you get heat in the house? How did you go to the bathroom? You know, just in general, how would you handle a winter morning in St. Rose in the late 20s or early 30s?
And bring it back to maybe present day, to how you do it.
Okay, how would I compare the early days in the house in St. Rose with my conditions I got today? First of all, the house in St. Rose, after about 5 or 6 years, was our own house that we were built. And as far as we were concerned, it was a mansion. It was just a little 2-bedroom, 1 bath, kitchen, living room, and dining room. No inside toilets. Had running water, but the water came from a cistern because there was no water furnished by the parish. There was no water lines or nothing. Everybody had cisterns to carry the water that came off the roof into the cistern. So you had no inside plumbing at all. However, they did have a bathtub and a wash basin with a pipe coming there with cold water, no hot water. Now, when you had to go to the bathroom on a cold morning, you just ran to the backyard to the hothouse, and you froze your behind off. That's all there was to it. That was your only choice. Now, when we got up in the morning, you had about 4 quilts on you trying to stay warm. The house was freezing, and luckily Mama was the slave. She would get up and start the fireplace when we were using a fireplace. So at one time we had a coal burning stove in the kitchen that we used most of the time, and she would get it started all the time. So when we got up, usually the house was a little warm. It wasn't frozen, but that's the way you got up. And at that time, you had electricity, but most people didn't have refrigerators. They used to get ice delivered in his old ice boxes every day. Of course, I think after a few years we got a refrigerator, which was out of this world because we could make ice cream then. And the heat finally went from the fireplaces to a floor furnace. They installed a floor furnace, which was out of this world then, because then we had an automatic floor furnace with a thermostat that came on just like it comes on today. Of course, the houses were not insulated or nothing, and it never got as warm as you do now, but it was a real improvement. Of course, the water was a problem because the cisterns used to get accumulation of dirt and soot and mud really at the bottom of the cistern. And every summer, when we got a little older, that was me and my brother's job. We drained the cistern completely, all the water. Then we'd get in it and shovel all that, about 8, 10 inches of mud, mostly what it was, all the dust that came off the roofs and shovel all that out. And by that time we had running water, not running water, but it was piped from the cistern. And we would turn the water back on, and we'd hose out all the cistern to get all that dirt off and hope it rains to fill the cistern again so we'd have some more water. So that was some of the bad problems at the time. But at the time, we thought we had a mansion, and we did for those times, really. Because a lot of people didn't have it as good as us, you know. But now, it's a different story. You got nice refrigerators, dishwashers, gas stoves. And first when we lived there, we didn't even have a gas stove. We had a wood cooking stove. And we got air conditioning. We got central heat. You can set it anywhere you want. And you can't beat what we have today, because I consider this a mansion too. I know to some people it's not, but to me it's real good.
How did you cook back then? When early on in St. Rose?
Well, in St. Rose it wasn't too long, but originally we cooked with a wood stove. And it used to be an iron stove with 4 burners on it, and you'd put the wood in there and cook with the wood stove. I don't think that lasts too long, though. I think pretty soon they came through with gas lines, and then we were able to buy a gas stove and cook with a gas stove. So it made a big difference when the gas lines came through. Then eventually it wasn't too much longer, too, when the water lines came through, that you didn't have to depend on the cistern anymore. And when the water lines came through, then we got an inside toilet installed so that we had the water to flush the toilets. So about that time, when we got the gas and the water and the furnace, floor furnace, boy, we thought we were living in hog heaven. Especially when you didn't have to run to that hothouse in the morning.
Was transportation and things like back then, and how long did it take to get from real far out there into New Orleans? And tell me about New Orleans around that time.
Well, about that time when we was real small, New Orleans looked like it was far away. You know, 18 miles, but it still seemed far away, because most people didn't come to New Orleans too often unless they had a serious illness or something. They might come to a doctor. But the transportation out there, half of the people, I'd say, had automobiles. Probably junks, old cars, couldn't afford new ones. And the other half, bum rides, walked. And to come to New Orleans, a couple of people that would work in New Orleans, they had a Horton Lines, which now have all kind of buses. They used to run a car, like a limousine that they rode, not big long ones, seat about maybe 6 or 8 people. And every morning they'd run that bus down the River Road to Carlton Avenue, and every evening they'd go from Carlton Avenue to River Road. And that's how the people, that few people that worked in New Orleans, got back and forth. But the individual transportation was not good. I mean, most people had whole pieces of junk because they couldn't afford nothing better.
Were the levees built up then?
Oh, the levees were built, yeah. When I was a kid, the levees were built. They were raised at a couple points. Now, the spillway wasn't built. The spillway was built during the time Roosevelt was elected the president. And when they opened the spillway for the first time, because I think the first year after they built the spillway, I think they had to open it because of floods, afraid of flooding New Orleans. And Roosevelt came down to see the spillway. And he came down the River Road in a big open limousine, and everybody all along there was standing on the levees just waving at him, and he was waving at everybody. Boy, that was a big event at that time. But the levees were there, even when I could remember it as long as I could remember. If they wouldn't have been there, the whole place would have been flooded every time the river raised. Because I've seen the water, even when the spillway wasn't open, maybe 18 inches, 2 feet from the top of the levee already. No, I don't know why I hear on the radio, on the TV, that says this tradition's been going on for 100 years. I don't know where the 100 years goes, because when I was out there, I never heard of bonfires. I never saw any bonfires. As far as I know, Mom and Dad had never talked about bonfires. And even after I went in the Army and came back, I never heard anybody talk about bonfires. Now they tell you on television that's a 100-year tradition. Well, maybe they did it once or twice 100 years ago, but it wasn't going on when I was a kid.
What's the rumor about that tradition? What is that tradition?
It was a tradition that they had along the levee, supposedly, that they were putting these bonfires to give light so St. Nick could find his way and not pass him by.
What are some other, what were you doing and what are your feelings and how old were you? Tell me about the day when JFK was shot.
When who?
JFK.
When J.F. Kennedy was shot, I was working at Laiche Sash and Door Company. And I had a customer that wanted something check on his job. It was somewhere in Gentilly. So I was on the way out there, and on the radio, I heard that Kennedy had just been shot. So I stopped at that job, and the guy had the radio on when I got there. And he was a little bit of particular, cranky guy, the kind of customer you don't want to deal with even in the best times. And when we got in the house and we were getting ready to start measuring stuff, he says, I'm going to turn the radio off so it don't disturb you. I said, well, if you turn the radio off, I'm leaving because I want to hear the news. And he finally turned the radio back on. And we measured what I had to do. And then when I went back to work, all we did the rest of the day is just listen to the radio. And everybody was in disbelief. They just couldn't believe it, really.
What was going on when they landed on the moon, and were you here and with your kids and your wife, or what was that like?
Really, I don't remember, Jason. When they landed on the moon, I thought if it was impressive, but it didn't really do nothing for me. And up till this day, sometimes I hear people say that they landed on the moon more than once. I don't know that they did or not, did they?
I think so.
In my opinion, I only know of one time. But I've heard them people talking about landing on the moon more than once. So it must have not impressed me too much that I can't remember more than once.
What was some of the worst weather, either the summer weather or winter weather that you can remember, either coming up or through your life?
Well, I think the worst weather, as far as the cold is concerned, was what? 16 and 1632? About 40 years ago, when the temperature in New Orleans went down to, I think, 8 degrees and stayed below 32 for, I think, 4 days, if I remember right. Everybody in town that had raised houses had nothing but broken pipes. My boss in the mill where I was working, he had sprinkler systems in and out. And he always turned the sprinkler systems off that was on the outside, but he left the sprinkler systems in. And me and his son both told him it's supposed to be down to 8 degrees. You think these sprinkler systems shouldn't be turned off? Oh no, they're not gonna freeze in here. Well, after the freeze, for a couple of days it wasn't safe to walk in the building. because it broke the pipes and it broke a lot of the elbows and stuff, and every now and then a piece of elbow or sleeve of cast iron would fall, and it just completely destroyed his sprinkler system. He had to redo the whole sprinkler system. In fact, out on the docks, New Orleans docks, all the sprinkler systems were busted up. They had to redo them all. And that's really the coldest weather I can remember.
That was probably in the 70s.
That was about 40 years ago.
I think that was probably about,
Well, I've been retired for 16 years. I've been retired 16 years. I worked at Tulane for 16 years. And it was when I was working at Lafitte. So it had to be sometime between 34 and 40 years ago. So 40 years ago would put it 40 years ago would put it somewhere, what, in the 70s, huh? No, the 60s, in the 60s, that's right. So that's about right. It was in the 60s. But it was cold. It was cold. And I don't know well, we were living on Gallia Drive, and that was a new house, fairly new house, and the slab and all the pipes were in the slab, so we really didn't get any damage. Everything was protected, but it was a cold winter.
Remember any hurricanes that hit you particularly hard, and what was it like for y'all here?
Well, the only hurricane that I can remember mainly is Betsy. And we live in Gentilly, in that terrace section. So the water didn't bother us. A lot of them got flooded down there closer to Chalmette, no. But we was terrace house and it didn't bother us. And even though there was a lot of damage done, I think all we lost was a couple of ridge tiles on top of the house. That was about the only damage we had. So we really lucked out on that. But the old house shook like mad when that hurricane was going on.
What was any more questions about that? What was September 11th like for you?
September 11th? You're talking about the September 11th with the bombing and, the airplanes in New York. It just seemed unreal, just unbelievable. It couldn't be happening to us. So it was real tragedy for everybody, I think. Everybody felt it.
How did that compare to Pearl Harbor?
Well, I think really Pearl Harbor was worse. But at that time, the condition of the world, there was a war going on in Europe. And I guess you could halfway expect it. And actually, that was mostly military personnel, too. Those were supposed to be soldiers and sailors, so at least you could say they were bombing the right people. Where in New York, those towers, those were all innocent people just sitting there doing the honest day's work. So I guess both of them are pretty drastic.
We have a few more minutes. Tell me, what do you think the future's going to be like? Today, maybe say today's date. Tell me about where you think our world's going, and when you and I and my dad here, when we're gone, and other Laiches or other descendants are doing their thing, what's that going to be like?
I really don't know, but I don't see much hope for them. My opinion is not going to get much better. I think if anything, it's going to get worse. I don't have too much faith in the future of the world, really.
Any particular way you think it will not be as good?
Well, I think this threat that we've got is going to be here forever. I don't think they can correct it. And somebody's going to be getting hit somewhere all the time.
Terrorism.
Terrorism. I don't think they'll ever control terrorism. Unless they can come up with some better answers than they got now.
What would you want to say to your great grandkids or all of our kids, people down the line?
What would I want to say to people down the line? That's a tough problem. I don't know what to tell them, except to try to live right. If they can do anything to make the world better, try to do it, because they sure are going to need it. But I can't think of anything else to tell them.
What are some of the things in your life that kind of gotten you through? When you think back and you think that you made not necessarily a job decision, but a decision in your mind or in your heart, what are decisions throughout your life that have sustained you to get to here? And how would you tell someone younger than you about those decisions?
Well, I know one decision I made was to get into the Air Force, stay out of the mud of the infantry. I'm sure that was a damn good decision. Not that it would have made me any safer, I don't think, but at least you live a clean life. You didn't have to live in the mud. Other decisions, I don't know. I don't know that my job decision was that good, because it wasn't a high-class, high-paying job like it should have been. But it got us through, so I guess it was all right.
What part does religion? Tell me about who you are on a spiritual aspect.
Well, I'm a Catholic, and I believe in God. And I go to church every Sunday. And in fact, since my wife died, I go to communion every Sunday. So I guess religion's an important part to me. Because when you get at the end of the line, I guess you get more religious than when you're young. But I've always gone to church and always followed the Catholic religion pretty close.
Let's see here. Do you have anything that's going through your mind that I haven't asked?
No, not really.
Really?
I just think this is great. I hope it turns out good. I've really enjoyed it.
Tell me about all the vehicles you've had and which one you like the best.
So I've had a number of vehicles. I think we started off with a,
Not just memory.
well, the first vehicle I had was, I think, a 1934 Plymouth. That's when I got the job in New Orleans at Higgins, and I had to go back and forth every day. And I didn't have no transportation. And Daddy told me, he said, well, you can't go to work every day or look for a job in New Orleans if you don't have any transportation. So he had somebody that used to sell him or try to sell him trucks for his bread route all the time. And he called him up, he says, you got a decent car that sells cheap? My son needs one. And he had, I think it was a 34 Plymouth. And I don't remember how many mileages they had on it, but it was pretty old, because this was 1941 or 41. So the car was about 9 years old. But it was in good shape. And the guy told Daddy, says, this car's in good shape. It's not going to give you any trouble. So we bought it. I think it cost about $300. Car ran fine, never had no trouble with it. The only thing I had to do was carry a little oil in the in the trunk all the time, 'cause it used oil like mad. And if you went too far, you had to stop and check the oil. But I was only going to use it for 4 or 5 months, so that was good. After I went in the Army, Daddy said, "What you want me to do with your car?" I said, "Sell it for whatever you can get. 'Cause I might need the money for something." So I think he sold it for $400. I think we made $100 on the deal. And that's what I used to buy your mama's engagement ring when I was in the Army. Then the next car was after I got out the Army. I think it was a 49 Ford. That was secondhand too. And the next one was that 51 Mercury, which I thought was the best car ever made. Until I got the 74 Monte Carlo. And up to today, I still think that the Monte Carlo was the best car ever made. It ran like a charm. It roared like a charm. After that, then I went to work for Tulane, and they were buying the cars. The first one was a Oldsmobile Cutlass. The second one was no, the first one was that Monte Carlo. That's right, Tulane bought the Monte Carlo from me. Then the second one was a Cutlass, and the third one was a Cutlass. And that's about the time they went out of business, and the Cutlass was almost brand new, and I bought it from them out of steel. Then after that, I got the Pontiac, which is a real good car. Then the Buick LeSabre, which is going to be the last car I buy unless something happens drastic to the car. But the best one, I think, was the Monte Carlo in 1974.
I'm surprised that the 51 Mercury
Was good.
wasn't the best one.
The 51 Mercury was real good. There's no doubt about it. It roared good. It drove good. But I don't think it compared to the Monte Carlo.
I want to know how you dealt with teaching me how to drive in that 51 Mercury.
Did I teach you how to drive in the 51 Mercury? I don't remember.
City Park.
I don't remember.
City Park.
We went in City Park and drove. I don't really remember it.